Welcome, sports fans, to the first ever edition of Sports Cognition. I am your host, Michael Miles, and just want to thank you all for tuning in. All two of you, probably, which is going to be myself, maybe my wife. Who knows? I don't know if there's going to be many other people listening to this podcast, but we'll see and see how it goes. This is something I've always kind of wanted to do, so I always felt like I can kind of do it a little bit better than some of the other people. So, I'm just going to roll with it. Just going to go with it. And now that my wife has given me an early Father's Day gift with this microphone here, I kind of have to do it now. I mean, I kind of owe it to her to do it right, so I got to do it. And I was going to start off with talking about, kind of what this podcast is going to be about. Obviously, it's going to be about sports, but I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more different than some of your typical podcasts that you listen to, like on ESPN and things like that, where you have big name guys who are great at what they do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're super amazing, and I love listening to them myself. But when you listen to the morning sports radio shows over and over again, it's kind of the same topics over and over and over again. And it just keeps getting regurgitated by one show and then another show and then another show and then another show. And then they just kind of have different guests throughout the day to talk about those issues. But I don't really know exactly how I want to describe what this podcast is going to be like. I do know that I kind of want it to be kind of a little bit about how sports and life kind of interact, and because if you think about it, life is sports and sports are life. And what I mean by that is I'm not like maybe I am like a total sports head, but my wife would say I'm obsessed with sports, and I guess I kind of am, because I work in sports. I'm doing a damn podcast about sports, and I love sports, and they're fun, they're enjoyable, but there's a lot of things that go on in sports that kind of interact with our lives, and they like politics and movies and music and all kinds of things, really. And it's people don't give sports enough credit, I think, because there's people who are in sports, your Muhammad Ali's, your Colin Kaepernick's, who I'm not really trying to compare Kaepernick to Muhammad Ali. I think Muhammad Ali was, overall, what he did in his sports profession was can't be reached by Kaepernick. But I just mean how both men were taking some political actions for what they believed in and were heavily scrutinized for that. And so that's an example of sports coming into life, where it's not just about sports, it's about someone who's well known in the sports community and just in life in general, who's kind of seen as a celebrity, and they take that platform that they have and they use that for some of their own ideals and things like that, and trying to spread awareness for the greater good. So that's kind of one example about how sports and life interact. And right now, there's not a whole lot of sports interacting with our lives with the COVID-19 pandemic that's going on, and has heavily affected everyone, whether you're in sports or whether you're not in sports, whether you don't like sports or you love sports. But so what I've found, one of the things that made me want to start doing this podcast now is that I want to kind of know what other people are doing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was that I started watching wrestling again, pro wrestling. And it was a while where I was young, maybe from age 8, 9 up until 15, 16 or something like that, I was watching professional wrestling all the time. I loved it. It was great. Like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and Ultimate Warrior, and Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Coco Beware, Demolition, those kind of guys. The Undertaker, of course, who is my number one favorite. But, so the pandemic started and there were no sports to watch whatsoever. And I have a subscription to ESPN Plus. There's a little free plug there for ESPN Plus. I love it. I get to see all of my my college sports, like my alma mater, Southeast Missouri State, Go SEMO. I get to watch their football games. I get to watch a lot of other college and other sports on ESPN Plus. But aside from that, I was seeing that they were replaying old WrestleManias, not too old, but I guess some of the ones from like the early WrestleMania 30s or late 20s or things like that. And I stopped watching wrestling a long time ago, maybe by, I don't know, WrestleMania 12, maybe somewhere around there, maybe 13, 14. But I saw that there was a WrestleMania 36 coming up, the one where they held at the WWE training center, where it was just those wrestlers and no fans, and it was very weird. It was really weird. Going from watching old WrestleManias where these stadiums are filled with all these loud, crazy, passionate fans, and they're loving every minute of it, and you see the wrestlers feeding off of that and interacting with the crowds, and that's how it's supposed to be. It's entertaining, it's great, and that's what makes watching it at home even more fun. But when I watched WrestleMania 36, to backtrack a little bit, I went ahead and got the WWE network subscription, the free trial, just so I could see it. I was interested, so seeing some of those WrestleManias on the ESPN Plus, I wanted to see what this next WrestleMania was. And then I didn't even think about at the time that it was going to be the COVID-19 was going to be affecting it. And I started watching it, and there's no audience, and there's Rob Gronkowski, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And it was so weird. It was, I don't know, because maybe people who've been watching wrestling longer than I have consistently have enjoyed that last WrestleMania, but I didn't really so much. As someone who didn't really watch wrestling, took a very long hiatus from watching it, and then trying to pick it up and watch it again, it was a little difficult with no fans, and you could hear everything, and it was just really weird for me. I started watching those with my son, who's 7 years old, and he has really gotten into wrestling now because of that. And so what I've always wanted to do, I thought it'd be great to go back from the very first WrestleMania and just watch them all, So right now, my son and we are on WrestleMania, I think it's 12. And so he's loved it, I think the first WrestleMania he was a little bored with, but he's caught on quick. I think the first thing that really got him into wrestling was that he's a big fan of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. I think the first time he saw him was when we watched Moana as a family, my wife and my son and I. And we watched it religiously, over and over and over again. We love that movie. It's awesome. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. I mean, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, whoever you want to call him, he puts on a fantastic performance. And so we were watching some of the videos of the behind the scenes take about him singing his part. And so we'd watch it with my son, and I was like, that's The Rock. He used to be a professional wrestler, or is, or I didn't know at the time if he was really doing it still. But, and so that's how he came to find that his first favorite wrestler is The Rock. And so he's seen him in other things like Jumanji and stuff. So he's a big Rock fan, but we haven't gotten to the point yet to where he's even seen The Rock wrestle. I think I've showed him some YouTube videos before about The Rock wrestling and things like that. But other than that, he's never really seen much of The Rock. And so he's, every time we watch a WrestleMania, I told him that The Rock's first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 13. And I believe that's the case. So he's super hyped up to watch The Rock on his first WrestleMania. So when we get there, it's going to be great. But that's what we've been doing with our COVID-19 sportsless life, watching WrestleMania. And I got to tell you, it's brought back a lot of great memories for me watching those first few WrestleManias where you got Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, the Macho Man, George the Animal Steel, King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, of course, the legends, like those guys. And I started thinking, like, man, I remember when I had those, what were they, 10-inch or something, hard rubber WrestleMania action figures, and I played the shit out of those, man, all the time. I was in my bedroom playing with those things. I didn't even have one of those wrestling rings that you can play in there. I just kind of sat on my bed and I just went to town with them, and like I messed them up bad. Yeah. So that's, it's interesting how what this pandemic has done. For myself, it's made me visit, some of my childhood and get to share that childhood with my son. And it's been really awesome to be able to experience that with him and be able to be there with him to experience that. And he's already asked me, like, can we go to a wrestling event, whenever they have those? I'm like, sure, I have no idea when those are going to happen at any time soon. But, some people may not think that professional wrestling is sports, but it is. Excuse me, it is sports. It's sports entertainment. Those guys in the ring are some of the most athletic guys you'll find, and they take hits just as, could be just as bad as playing football sometimes. Like, I noticed that watching some of the wrestlers now compared to some of the wrestlers back in the day, like the late 80s, early 90s, like the wrestlers today they got it going on. These guys seem to have, they don't seem to be as huge and ripped, like aside from Brock Lesnar, but they're more like toned, very, very healthy looking. They're very athletic. They got like swimmers' bodies and like running back bodies and things like that. So when you compare it to some of the bodies of the wrestlers in the old days, those guys, they were big, but they still had a lot of fat going on, and they had like beer guts and everything, and like they weren't the most athletic looking guys, and you wouldn't ever think that they could be athletic just by looking at their bodies, but I feel like wrestling has really evolved over the years, and I think it's from what I've seen, it's gotten pretty good. I can't wait to see how it evolves. That's one of my favorite things about going back and watching all of the WrestleManias is seeing how wrestling has evolved just within a year of each other. Like from WrestleMania 1 to 2, like we're already up to WrestleMania 12 out of 36, and you're already seeing things like The Undertaker, this 6'10" guy who's gloomy and doomy, and he can jump basically over your head if he wanted to, and he walks along the ropes and jumps over the rope. Like, you wouldn't think a guy like that kind of size would be that athletic, but the guy is going off, and he's